I play Super Smash Bros. Ultimate all day, every day. Greetings, my friends, it's your hostess with the mostest, Corey, from Super Kami Guru 9000. Today we're going to do things a little different. The last weekend I have just been absorbed in Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, the brand new big fighting game from the big classic crossover Nintendo franchise. And guys, I can't get enough of the game. It is completely addicting. And because of that, I've been sort of shirking some of my reviews and putting them off until the very last second. That's why I'm just going to go ahead and do something kind of unique for today. I'm just going to do like a big little quick rundown on all of the shows that I actually watched this weekend. I'm going to give a firm score, and that's going to be it. This is going to be very off the cuff. The main reason I'm doing this is because I just want to play some more Super Smash Bros. Ultimate. I'm not going to lie, guys. And I'm an adult. I have a lot of responsibilities with work, family, friends. I barely have any time to play video games anymore, and I wanted to devote this entire weekend to playing this game because it's just that damn good. I've been playing non-stop with my friends all weekend, and I still want to play through a lot of the single-player stuff. Basically, I'm doing it for me this time. That's just the way it's going to go down. But I am going to give my thoughts on a lot of the things that I've read and watched over the course of the weekend. And when we get to the next episode reviews, I'll elaborate maybe a little bit more on what it is that I actually watched. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump right in. The first thing we're going to talk about is the brand new chapter of One Piece. The Wano Kingdom arc is continuing, and there's two pretty big events which are going on in this chapter. The biggest one is we get to go to Sanji and their group as he's making a big name for himself in the city and creating all of this delicious soba, which impresses the citizens as well as all of the ladies, including this one cute little girl who's also kind of really creepy all at the same time. Her name is Toko, or Otoko, and we get to learn that the Yakuza in this town are trying to take over Sanji's shop, and then he promptly ends up kicking the ever-living shit out of all of them, sending them flying like fucking Team Rocket. Right after that, we get the introduction, the formal introduction of Orochi into the series. The reason that he's going to be playing an important role is that little girl Otoko is actually a part of this group of these courtesans, these super popular Japanese idols, basically, and they're getting ready to have this big competition and basically have like the crowning achievement of who is the hottest woman in the Wano Kingdom, and of course Robin is going to be invited, and this means she's going to get a court right in front of Orochi, who shows off his silhouette in this chapter. He basically looks like a giant multi-headed dragon, which ties into the fact that his name is Orochi. That's based on the Yamato no Orochi, which is basically a giant freaking Hydra. A Japanese Hydra, if you will, and it's a great introduction to his character, and overall this was a very fun read, made really fun simply just by the art and the way that everything looks, giving this one a 5 out of 5. Next, we're going to talk about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Golden Wind, another fantastic episode showing off Narancia's battle against Formaggio, who has a stand which allows him to alter his size. He can become really tiny, he can become really tall, but he also has the extra benefit of being able to wound people, and when he does this, they slowly start to shrink themselves. And that's what happens to Narancia throughout most of this episode, where he starts to realize that he's actually shrinking, and the way that they show this off at first is so fantastic. Him finding his old knife, which has suddenly doubled in size, the fact that the car that he's next to is absolutely gigantic. Before he realizes it, he is a tiny little guy, and it sort of feels like this strange combination of Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and Ant-Man. It's a lot of fun, and even though Formaggio seems to have a big advantage in this battle, Narancia is able to actually use his stand to constantly like home in on him. We learned that the Aerosmith flying airplane has the ability to hone in on its targets that are breathing. It takes a long time for Formaggio to realize this, and he ends up going through a big freaking Pickle Rick journey through the sewers where he goes up against giant rats and all sorts of other really crazy shit. We also delve into his backstory and his connection with the other group that used to be a part of Passione, which has decided to rebel against them and try and kill Trish. It leads to what might be one of the most ridiculous scenes of the series, where we get to see that Formaggio can use his abilities in a number of really crazy ways. He actually assassinates this guy by shrinking a car and dropping that into his drink. The guy drinks the water, and then later on the car expands, exploding out of this guy's body and slamming down on top of a woman. It is so fucking insane, but it's just incredible. It kind of reminds me of the scene where Cars transformed his hand into a squirrel. It's just so crazy that it can only work in the show, and I have to admit, I laughed my ass off forever just watching that scene. But the battle between Narancia and Formaggio is far from over. It looks like it's going to continue in the next episode. Can't wait to see more. Basically, this series can do no wrong. I loved it. I loved the backstory of Formaggio's group. They all have really crazy and ridiculous designs, and like a lot of the other characters in the show, they have really funny names which are associated with food, like sorbet and gelato. It also shows how hardcore this show is actually going to be, where we get to see what happens when someone tries to actually rebel against the Passione group. These two guys end up getting killed, and one of them actually gets sliced and diced into so many individual pieces that they actually end up being placed in these little square tanks of water to preserve them. It's basically a big message from the bosses: look, don't cross my path or I'm gonna fuck you up and turn you into some modern art that's really gonna freak you right the fuck out. Basically, yeah, JoJo's fucking awesome. 5 out of 5. Goblin Slayer. I actually don't have much to say about episode 10, as it's definitely a very slow episode. It's just the characters just sort of going about their normal day. What I did love about the episode is we got to see more of Goblin Slayer's human form in this episode, even though they still obscure his face for some reason. But this episode actually ended up being kind of cathartic. I actually really ended up enjoying it, just watching these characters hang out and enjoy each other's company, as well as this is the very first time where we've pretty much had the entire principal cast together in one single episode, sharing a meal together. And of course, one of the biggest tension-filled moments of this episode is seeing all of these women together who all seem to be head over heels in love with Goblin Slayer. You know, we finally got to see the cowgirl joined with the priestess, the high elf archer, as well as the guild girl, who's my personal favorite if I had to actually choose one. It's just nice, though, seeing these characters just be themselves and relax, knowing that eventually there's going to be more doom, gloom, and destruction in the future, as well as still continuing to show that this is basically what happens to the side characters of a much larger world. There's the implication that there was this massive battle that went on between these heroes and this demon lord, which has had a massive effect on the world, but we don't really get to see it. That's what I think has always been really fascinating about Goblin Slayer. You get to see what's going on underneath the underneath, so to speak, the underbelly of this fantasy world. There's giant grand battles going on elsewhere, but there's also these other little crazy things going on in the deepest, darkest shadows of the world. I think the best scene of the entire episode, however, has got to be the final moments where Goblin Slayer and Cowgirl are actually returning back to the farm. And what's so striking about this moment, it's for me, is honestly how sad it was, because basically, Goblin Slayer's entire shtick is that he's getting revenge for the death of his sister and his family from all of the goblins, and he's basically stuck in this never-ending cycle of revenge. And even when he's surrounded by people who love him and care about him and genuinely just want to associate with him, he never really manages to warm up to them and continues to just be this dark, stoic character who's obsessed with nothing but revenge. And it's a sad moment because the cowgirl realizes he's probably never going to change and there's nothing that's going to be able to bring him back. This is who he is now, and he's fully embraced it, and nothing's going to change it. It's even more sadder by the fact that we get to see that he's completely lost in this quest for revenge, as there's this one scene of him constantly going on patrol, and they pretty much reuse the shot every single time, showing that he's constantly going to be doing this forever, and in a way, he's sort of trapped in his very own sort of revenge. The final shot, however, has got to be one of the most ominous, as when he looks through these bushes, he can see all of these footprints, tiny footprints, implicating that a ton of goblins are coming to town to fuck up all sorts of shit. It's really disturbing. Even though this demon lord has been defeated, there's still evil out in the world. It's unfortunately a strong message that no matter how much we try to eradicate the evil things in this world, wherever there's light, there's always going to be shadow. So, Goblin Slayer, while I said it wasn't really that great at the end of the day, in many ways was kind of an impressive episode, and I think one of the slower ones, but one that I found myself getting a lot of enjoyment out of and making me realize that I love these characters, despite the fact that they don't even have a name. And if they can actually make me feel something from that, I think that's a pretty big accomplishment, which is why I'm going to give this episode a solid 4 out of 5. Moving on from that, we're going to go to Sword Art Alicization. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best episode of this season thus far, and maybe the most intense episode of the entire franchise. It also firmly established that, yes, there are going to be high stakes in this series, and it's not going to be afraid to go into some very dark territory. You knew immediately going into this episode that it was going to be really intense, as there was actually a warning at the very beginning, which I don't believe has ever happened in any other episode of Sword Art Online. That alone made me realize, okay, something really intense is going to go down here. And it was building up to it, especially in the last episode with Rios and Humbert basically taking advantage of their power. And we got to see that come to full fruition into this episode in what might be the most uncomfortable scene that I've actually seen from the entire franchise. So the main story of this episode is that Humbert and Rios are still continuing to do everything in their power to get rid of anyone in their way, especially these commoners like Kirito and Eugeo, and of course their two pages, Tease and Roni. And in seeing this, we eventually learned that they're not actually going after their friend Frenica, but both of them individually, and it's a perfect way to get to Kirito and Eugeo. But what's really disturbing is how they've actually gone about punishing these two girls by actually tying them up, throwing them on their beds, and basically having their way with them. And what's most disturbing about all of this is that it's something that's actually allowed within this world. They're actually manipulating the taboo index, the rules of the underworld, in order to use their high stance as nobles in order to basically have perfect law. They can't be questioned in anything that they're doing. They're a higher authority. And even that means sexually assaulting and molesting two girls against their will. It's really disturbing, and I think a really relevant message for things that are going on in the world right now. I mean, it's hard not to ignore the fact that this is an episode which is tailor-made for the Me Too era. And I'm not trying to speak against the Me Too movement at all. I think it's a really important thing, and men who abuse their power to sexually assault women is a very terrible thing. It just makes this episode all the more relevant today that these two characters are abusing their power in order to harm these two girls, and all in the act of getting revenge against someone that they have a petty rivalry with. It's a pure abuse of power, and it's absolutely horrifying seeing it happen on screen, especially because when it's happening, Eugeo can't do a damn thing about it, knowing that if he breaks the taboo index, some really bad things could potentially happen. However, these two douchebags absolutely have it coming in spades, and Eugeo actually manages to lose control. His eye freaking explodes after overloading, and he ends up cutting off Humbert's arm. And unlike a lot of the other scenes in the series, things get surprisingly violent here as blood just sprays all over the room, all over the bodies of these poor, terrified girls, and everything just ends up transforming into a different series at this point. I'd never seen anything this intense from Sword Art Online, and this is when Kirito decides to come into the room. He ends up having an epic battle with Rios, who completely loses his shit, and it leads to what might be the most satisfying moment where Kirito ends up cutting both of his arms off, causing him to completely bleed to death. But the reason that this scene was so effective and horrifying was not because of the violence, but because of how this AI reacted during this moment, how it actually developed this malicious personality, and the fact that it died due to a logical paradox. There's a scene where Rios' arms are just exploding with blood all over the room, freaking Evil Dead 2 style. And what ends up happening is he's demanding that Humbert actually, use some cloth to tie up his arms and stop the bleeding. The problem is he can't do that. For Humbert to do that would be going up against the taboo index. And since Rios doesn't have two arms anymore and can't help himself, he's not going to be able to do anything. Does he let his friend die, or does he allow himself to actually die right there? Basically, he's in a rock and a hard place, and the taboo index ends up working against him. He ends up freaking out and basically just dying right there on the spot. It's an absolutely terrifying moment, and it's really creepy to know that all of these characters that technically exist in this world aside from Kirito are not real. They're artificial souls created within this machine, and yet they've developed these such disturbing rules and personalities about themselves. So Kirito and Yujiro naturally end up getting thrown in jail, but they suddenly are released, and they're actually brought before a very important person. It's none other than Alice in all of their glory. This early in, they are already reunited with her character. The implication is that she lost her memories, and she doesn't know who these two are anymore. Yujiro seems to remember who she is. I mean, that's very obvious. That's a whole part of his quest. But I'm interested to see why she is the way she is now, if she's been brainwashed, if she's even the same Alice she was before. All I know is, guys, this is an amazingly crazy episode of Sword Art Online, and like I said, the most intense material that I've seen. It was done with some amazing gusto and some of the most atmospheric animation and great use of color and music. Basically, this was a perfect episode, but not for everyone. It is very intense and disturbing. But like I said, an episode which is more relevant now than I think it's ever going to be. A very hard-hitting episode, which really firmly establishes that this is going to be unlike any other season of SAO. I can't praise it enough. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. Moving on from there, we have Gridman. Another crazy episode which probably has the best action that I have seen from the entire series. This is basically getting close to the end game of Gridman, and things are officially picking up from here. Akane is utilizing all of those giant kaiju which have constantly been in the backgrounds of every single episode. They're spewing this like poisonous gas all over the city, which is actually what she's using to alter the minds of people. And she, of course, goes back to her old ways of bringing out some kaiju monsters, and a big battle ensues. Now, this monster is defeated pretty early on, but we get to learn that eventually another monster is actually inside it, which appears to be some sort of physical manifestation of Akane's soul. And it basically just looks like a giant pointy freaking clam with a giant eyeball in the middle that can fire lasers. But it's unlike any other kaiju that we've seen from the series, as it's incredibly acrobatic and can move very fast, and it seems to be stronger than any other kaiju that we've actually seen from the series thus far. It isn't until the very end of the episode where we get this amazingly epic battle, which has got to be one of the most satisfying things that I've actually seen from the franchise. We get full-powered Gridman, which is really awesome, but it's actually Auntie who ends up stealing the show, as he, of course, wants to continue to kill Gridman, but at the same time, it's getting to the point where it's kind of that personality of like, if anyone's going to destroy Gridman, it's going to be me, and he decides to fight back against this giant monster and transforms into a new form, which is known as Grid Knight, which is basically a darker version of Gridman. And I have to admit, it's way freaking cooler looking, and it leads to an amazing battle, which has got to have some of the best animation that I've seen from the franchise thus far. Just watching this monster flip around and jump off the rooftops and dodge all these things in the city, and Grid Knight, who's a way more acrobatic fighter than Gridman, utilizing a lot of unique techniques as well. Guys, this is the best action that I've seen from this show. It's distinctly Trigger, and it's also giving me some stuff that I've never seen before, and I hope to see more from the future of this show, to be perfectly honest. I think we're going to get a definitive ending in a couple of episodes, but it would be nice to see what else that Trigger could actually do with the Ultraman series or more of this tokusatsu genre. It just gets me excited to see more of what they're capable of. Really, just visually speaking, guys, this episode just freaking rocked. Speaking of amazing visual experiences, One Piece. One Piece this week was on freaking point. Not only was the battle between Luffy and Katakuri just so incredibly fast and fluid, and featured some crazy moments like Katakuri transforming his arm into a friggin' Gatling gun, watching Luffy dodge all of this stuff was just like a freaking movie quality, guys. It was so great. But the best thing about this episode has got to be the Straw Hat Pirates fighting against Big Mom. It was something that I thought was okay in the manga version. The anime version sold it in almost every way, and without a shadow of a doubt, one of the biggest stars of the episode has got to be Jinbei. He proved how real powerful he was in this episode, as he was able to punch Big Mom so hard in her giant enraged form that she actually ended up flying off the ship. She was just barely saved by Zeus. But this moment, guys, was just solid. It was also preceded by a moment where he created a giant wave that splashed right into her, getting rid of all of the fire around her body. That moment, along with that big punch, was honestly one of the coolest moments of the entire Whole Cake Island arc. Even Nami, in this episode, absolutely brought the thunder, as well as Brook. They actually created this combination attack where Brook cut Zeus in half, which was making it hard for Big Mom to stand up, and then this giant ring of destruction just appeared around on Big Mom, and Nami just absolutely fried her in this moment. The Battle of the Straw Hats going up against Big Mom is one of the greatest moments from the entire franchise, and that combined with Luffy's battle with Katakuri, which continues to be breakneck, this is one of the best looking episodes of the Whole Cake Island arc. You guys have got to check this out. I can't sell this episode enough. It is just a visual treat, and it makes me so happy to see Jinbei be a part of the crew, because, man, guys, he is just freaking awesome! And that brings us to Boruto Naruto Next Generations. We're talking about 2 episodes today. One, because I didn't talk about the one last week. We're just going to talk about it here. I don't really have much to say about these episodes, because frankly, I just think they're kind of okay. It's basically this, like, little journey between Boruto and Inoki as they're making this way to this intel point, and they end up running into this, like, big training camp, which features a character from the Chunin exam, and some of that stuff is really well animated, but basically here it's just the Inoki and Boruto show. Honestly, guys, I think I'd much rather just sort of elaborate on this when I get to the next Boruto review, as I just don't have much of an opinion on what's actually going on here. These 2 episodes kind of stop the entire arc in its track, but at least it features a scene of fighting against a giant wolf. Sorry, I wish I could say more about it, but I was just kind of tuning out while watching that episode. But like I said, I will elaborate on that a little bit more in the Boruto review when I get to the next one. But if I could give both of these episodes a score right now, probably just 3 out of 5s for both of them. I'd like to give the second episode, the latter one, maybe a 4, just for the animation and the artwork being a little more cleaner and consistent and honestly pretty nice. But overall, just sort of meh experiences as we continue this crazy arc, which had Mitsuki in it, actually, which is pretty cool. Like I said, I'll elaborate on it more. Really, I gotta get back to Smash Brothers, I have to be perfectly honest. I'm sorry if this isn't the video you were looking for, or the reviews that you were hoping to get, but that's just the way that it's actually gotta be this time. Like I said, next time I will expand on these just a little bit more. I had to have some time with this game this weekend. It's so very rare that I get time to actually just really veg out and play a video game for a long period of time, and I've been waiting for this one for a long time, so there it is. And speaking of which, for all 5 of you that care, I am probably going to be making another Smash Brothers video coming soon. I wanted to do another top 5 DLC for all the big challenger packs that they have coming out, but they've already revealed the very first character, which is fucking Joker from Persona 5. So I'm going to have to do my top 4, so I want to get that done before they announce the next character, so make sure to stay tuned for that. But if there are any other reviews or videos you guys want to see me work on, let me know what they are in the comment section below. Let's get discussions going about all of these episodes in the comment section. I promise we'll get back to normal next time, but there it is. I'll see you all next time, and as always, stay down, baby.